You know what? I do empathize with Carly in this week's episode of iCarly because I didn't learn how to change a tire until about a year and a half ago when my girlfriend showed me, and she can still change a tire quicker than I can. You know what? I'm very proud of her. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today, yes, we're getting into episode 11 of iCarly. I'm so sorry for missing out on last week's episode, I Take a Girls Trip, and it was one of the best episodes of the season, but I'm excited to talk about whether or not this is 2 weeks in a row that we get a good episode of iCarly, or if this is a step back from last week's episode. Now, the title of this week's episode is I Can Fix It Myself, and guys, we're 2 episodes away from the season finale, and a very interesting note about this episode in particular, it was directed by Nathan Kress, yes, Freddie himself. So I was so curious to see how this would all play out, and the story itself was pretty compelling. But before we get into whether it worked for me and what didn't work too well for me, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where we talk about TV and movies like this all the time. So if you don't want to miss out, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, y'all, and get loud in the comments and let me know what you thought of episode 11. Was it one of your favorites of the season, or is it sort of in the middle for you? And hit the thumbs up button if you are a fan of iCarly. So this episode stars all of our favorites, of course, Miranda, Cosgrove, Trainor, Nathan, Kress, Laci, Mosley, and Jaidyn Triplett, and luckily we do see Lyric Lewis come back as Maeve for a second week in a row. But this plot, of course, is twofold. The first, the main storyline, is Carly Shay trying to fix her car and save what is a very sentimental part of her life, thanks to this mechanic named Wes, who conveniently rescued her on the side of the street in Carly's Taco Tina costume, so that moment was incredibly funny. But the B plot here is Harper. She's trying to get this job with Double Dutch, and when she does get it, she learns a very interesting truth about Maeve's past. But let's start right at the beginning of this week's episode, guys. I enjoyed the setup to the story. You can tell that the last half of this season is focusing more on our cast rather than just trying to place in cameos. See, I didn't like episode 9 very much because I didn't think the cameo and the story was strong enough, but here I do like that there's this central cast that they're focusing on, and Maeve is an amazing addition, so I don't even really consider her just a cameo. But I do love how they set everything up, including this character Wes. Wes is played by Josh Plaze, at least I hope that's how you pronounce his last name, and I thought that his chemistry with Carly was very good, and I do think that their humor, the back and forth dialogue, was excellent. And another pair that actually worked for me in this episode was also Trainor and Lyric Lewis. Both Maeve and Spencer, well, they're clearly sleeping together as they allude to in the beginning of this episode, but I love the fact that they're in a relationship and they're also just having fun with this role, and it doesn't seem like they're trying to do anything too serious, clearly, because as we know, Spencer is just a goofball. But I love that both of these pairings just really work in this episode. And then the story takes a very interesting turn when Carly Shay goes and takes an auto repair class, which is instructed by Wes, and learns that her car is going to cost $15,000 to repair. So what does she do? Well, Carly wants to fix it herself. But I do love the fact that leading up to this moment, we got some cool banter between Carly and this actor who plays Regina, I believe her name is. I thought that they were both very funny together. So what I will say is that all of this lead up is building up to a very, I would say, satisfying payoff. But before we talk about the ending, guys, we got to get to one of the more interesting story turns in this episode, which is Maeve faking her kidnapping at sea. So Spencer and Maeve have to do a very good job at, well, they actually don't do a very good job at all, but they think they're doing a good job at distracting Double Dutch, who is this pop star that Harper interviews for and becomes her stylist or fashion designer. And it's really neat that honestly Harper is getting closer and closer to her dreams, but of course there's always something funny that must happen, and in this case it's very serious for Harper because learning that her cousin was not kidnapped at sea is definitely world shattering. But I can't tell you how many times I laughed out loud with Trainor and Lyric Lewis because both of them are just so hilarious, and again, their chemistry is just radiating off the screen. Now, what I will say is that this episode was definitely leading up to Wes and Carly being interested in one another, because at first Carly in her Taco Tina costume noticed Wes, and there's this like funny like romantic moment. But at the end of the episode, once Wes of course fixes or tries to fix Vin Diesel and tells Carly unfortunately it's beyond repair, they end up, well, solidifying a date for Saturday night. So it's kind of neat how everything, like I just mentioned, was building up to something really, really solid at the end. And of course, Harper does not take the news from her cousin Maeve very well, but by the end of the episode, they end up making up. Now, there is something here that is definitely going to cater to longtime fans of iCarly, because Sam is mentioned here more than in any episode of season 1 of this revival. Carly was telling Wes that Vin Diesel is not just a car she loves, but it's a sentimental piece to her life because basically that car makes her feel connected to Sam. It sounds like Carly and Sam took lots of car rides together there, and there's even this old gum that is found underneath the dashboard. But you can kind of tell that the way they're writing this, see, it almost sets up for Sam coming back in the finale for season 1, but I just don't think in episode 13 Sam is coming back, and I don't think that with everything that happened in the original series, Sam is going to want to come back to this revival. And I do think, one, it would be great if it happened, but it has to be on her own terms. It can't just be because they're paying her a ton of money because of everything that happened outside of iCarly, the show itself. But it was really sweet that in the final 5 minutes we learned that Vin Diesel's not gone forever and that Spencer actually built a seat in the studio for Carly and her friends. And then in that very moment is when Laci, Mosley, and Lyric Lewis share that moment together where Maeve and Harper basically make up and say, you know what, it's okay, we'll put that beyond us, and yeah, I still love you. So it's just really neat to see all of this wrapped up very nicely at the end. So outside of the story itself, guys, I will say that this episode for me is one of my favorites of the season because it has a very consistent story, and I love the fact that this episode again showcases just how good this iCarly revival series has been. It's the second week in a row where the story's strong, the humor is very, very effective, and I thought that everyone on screen had really natural chemistry. And even though Millicent is getting less and less exposure on screen, I think that Jaidyn Triplett is still doing a very good job, and she really is the reason why Carly even took the auto repair class in this episode anyway. And someone who does get a lot of screen time but got a little bit less here was Laci Mosley, although when she does get moments to shine, she's a scene stealer when she's on screen. But with 2 episodes left, guys, I almost anticipate that they're going to keep this tight, where they're not going to just try to bring in cameos from the original series, and I don't think that they're going to try to overextend themselves. If anything, I'm hoping that with episodes 12 and 13 being the finale of course, that they kind of move the story forward and leave us hanging for a season 2, because as we know, season 2 has been greenlit at Paramount Plus. So I'm really curious to see how the story beats go as they move forward into the final stretch. So yes, Nathan Kress directed the heck out of this episode, and the entire cast and crew were just on their A game. So episode 11, even though it's not my favorite of the season, does not mean that it's not one of the best, and I do think it is one of the best to me. Guys, this is an A episode. I laughed out loud, I was engaged with the story, and it's nice to see character development for our core cast. So again, this is the bread and butter for the revival series, and guys, I'm just so happy we get iCarly on Thursdays every week, even though we're not gonna get that in 2 weeks, guys. We're gonna be in a little bit of a drought until season 2, but hey, we're still gonna cover it right here on the channel. So if you don't want to miss my review and recap for episode 12 next week, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, y'all. Hit the thumbs up button if you also enjoyed this episode like I did, and get loud down below in the comments and let me know which moment was your favorite in episode 11, because I can empathize with Carly a little bit. I try to fix things myself and they don't always go very well. I need to call my girlfriend for some auto repair lessons. Alrighty, y'all, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.